Welcome to Creating Connections Podcast, episode 144. I am Mitch Taylor.
And I'm Vickie Musni.
Happy New Year!
Yes, welcome back.
We made it to 2018. Holy cow. Goodbye to 2017.
Yep.
Bye.
And thanks for letting us take a break for a couple weeks, especially you, Mitch. I know that's not always easy for you.
Something like that, yes.
Time to get personal today.
Yes, we have a personal topic today, and I believe Vickie is going to share a personal experience.
Yep.
And we're chatting about bouncy houses, closets of clothes, and Star Wars. How does that apply to your business? Listen on for more.
That was nice and easy.
What are you talking about? This also speaks to a much bigger issue.
Providing personal solutions through understanding people. This is the Creating Connections Podcast with Gitomer Certified Advisor Mitch Taylor and Certified Personality Trainer Vickie Musni.
Welcome back to Creating Connections Podcast, episode 144. I'm Mitch.
And I'm Vickie.
So what do bouncy houses, closets of clothes, and Star Wars have to do with your business? Well, Vickie's going to share a personal experience.
Yes. The tie-in to those is that those are all things that as a mom, a working mom, a business owner mom, I understand and can relate to. A couple months ago, November, I went to a National Speakers Association meeting. And before the formal meeting with the presentation, there's always a mastermind. And the first meeting that I was at a couple months before that, they had the format where everybody went around the room and shared a question. And if you had a possible solution, then you reached out to that person. And I thought, okay, this is a really efficient way to have a big mastermind. Little did I know, because I was prepared. I had my question. I knew what I needed help with in my business. I knew what I was looking for. They totally flipped the format around and it was all different. And I didn't get to ask that particular question. And I really wanted to talk to somebody in that Speakers Association about websites. Who did they use? Who do they know that specializes in websites for speakers? And I didn't have a chance to do that. And lo and behold, my friend Rob Foray, who's been a guest on our show.
Yes, love Rob.
Came in and said, hey, Vickie, I want you to meet my friend Sarah. We've been friends since high school, but she and her husband own a web design company, and she's done all 3 of my websites. And I went, oh, maybe I'll get my chance after all. So I invited her to sit next to me during the dinner so we could chat a little bit more. And there were so many things that I loved about that conversation and the ones after that I wanted to bring that up this month as my personal share.
Cool.
One of the things was I found myself painfully aware that I did not want to ask, so how much is it?
Right?
Because I know as a wedding and event business owner, we get so annoyed by that question. Yeah. And Mitch and I have done webinars and workshops and seminars to help people figure out how do you continue the conversation. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I don't want to be that girl that just says, so how much is it to build a website? Because I know that it's more complicated than I realize. Mm-hmm. Like, I know enough to know that there's stuff that I don't know. Let me just put it that way. So I tried asking other different kinds of questions. And she was really great and helpful, and it kind of explained her approach and what she wants to do. But one thing that I really loved and appreciated is that we were sitting together at a dinner in another event that had a different purpose. And she knew that I was interested in her services, but she didn't shift the conversation to become a sales pitch. She didn't make that event something different than it was intended to be and try to strike while the iron's hot and sell me her pitch right then and there. And I loved that she had boundaries and confidence. She wasn't thinking like, oh, well, this person's going to go away if I don't, talk to her right now. Mm-hmm. She was willing to be present and let that event be what it was, and then still follow up and set an appointment with me for a better time. And I think there's so many times as a wedding business owner where I see people not doing this well.
Right.
At bridal shows, for example, when your goal, I think, should be to set an appointment, not try to convince someone to make a decision right there on the spot, or even at networking events where people turn the conversation to try to make it a sales consult when it really should be about building relationships. So I looked at that going, that's something that I think Sarah did really, really well right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of examples where
Absolutely.
that hasn't been the case too.
So again, I want to bring it back to our topic, our title.
Well, that was one lesson. Okay.
Right. But the Bouncy House, where does that come into play?
So then we scheduled our first meeting, and we waited. I met her right before Thanksgiving. So we scheduled our very first consult, was shortly after Thanksgiving, maybe like December 1st. I don't remember exactly when. And knowing that I'm not a techie person, and that, yes, I use the internet and I do Zoom stuff with you all the time, but I don't love the behind the scenes. I don't care how it works. I just need to know that it does. But I know there's stuff about websites that I needed to understand. And what Sarah was really great at is using analogies that I could understand. She talked about, I don't even know the technical terms, so if you guys are watching, you can laugh at me, but no. She talked about an analogy, closets full of clothes. Like there has to be a place for everything. And in my head, I could picture, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. I get it. I know where my shoes are, and I know where I hang my dresses versus where I hang my shirts and my pants. So you're organizing different things that have to do with my website somewhere else. Okay, I can relate to that. Then she talked about server options, and she goes, okay, so imagine a bouncy house. If everybody's all around the same size, it kind of works. But then you have that one really big kid that's too old for the bounce house that jumps in. That's going to mess up your server. And if you reach that point, or if there's so much more activity, then you need to get your own bouncy house. And I'm like, oh, okay. I've got 4 kids. I've been to so many birthday party bouncy houses, and I've got one kid who's severely underweight. So he's been in that situation where all of a sudden he's getting tossed around and not getting his fair turn to jump.
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay. So when we start talking about server options, I have this picture that makes sense to me. She didn't try to talk to me in technical lingo that I couldn't understand. She was so good at putting it in terms that made sense to me.
Yeah. And
again, I look at that as an event business owner, and I see this a lot with DJs and photographers and videographers and people that know their gear really well, and they know the technical side.
Sure.
And it's really easy for you to talk with your colleagues that way, but that's not usually going to be the most effective way to talk to a potential client, unless that's their wheelhouse and they love that. But most brides, if you're talking about weddings as your event, they don't care. And even corporate planners, or thinking about, mitzvahs and quinces and things like that, those parents and those kids, they just want to know about the results.
Yeah.
So yes, there might be times when we have to educate them about how many speakers we need to fill, have the sound appropriate for that room and size and number of people. That's fine. But can you find ways to explain that don't make them feel stupid?
Right.
Can you just put it in simple terms?
That's so important. And what about the Force?
Okay, the Star Wars. So that's when I know. We got into the nitty gritty of, okay, so how is she going to build a website for my business when she doesn't run my business? Like, I have to help her know how to tell my story. So that's when she started talking about specific storytelling angles and how really we want to solve someone's problems. And she used all these great analogies about heroes, and she talked about different conflicts in Star Wars. And, not to say that, either us or the client are evil, but that there was this inner conflict, with Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader. And so what kinds of inner conflicts are our potential clients that we're trying to reach having? How can we, use the Force for good and help them solve their problems? And it may sound really silly, but it took something really nebulous. In my case, it's how to share my speaking and personalities training that I do into my new website, and made it simple. Okay, well, we're just telling a story. So what are the conflicts? What are the internal conflicts, the external conflicts, and how can you help solve them? Just like in Star Wars. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. That's not all big and scary.
Right.
I can answer those questions.
So the lessons learned, if you haven't picked it up yet out of this is what I have down here. Number one, be open to opportunities. So Vickie went into this thing expecting to get, to one thing, but then realized that the mastermind wasn't going to give her that at that point in time. But yet she got introduced to a friend of Rob's that made the connection.
Yep.
And then the other one I put down was be able to speak there. Well, let me back up before I hit that one. Is, the fact that this woman did not strike when the iron is hot, if you will. She gave it time to build the relationship first.
We talked about family and kids and what was going on at the meeting, and actually was just she was focused on just building a connection. I felt like she saw me and valued me as a person, not just as a potential client, dollar signs over my head.
Absolutely.
Like she saw me, and
absolutely,
I loved that.
And then finally, she was able to speak your language and put it in terms that you could easily understand. And I think that is one of the most difficult things sometimes. And that's where I really love the connection between personalities and sales. And what we do as creating connections to help you drive that home to truly understand who you serve and how to serve them better. Vickie, thank you so much for sharing that today.
Yeah, no, it was a fairly recent story, but I just felt like there were so many lessons. And sometimes we pick on people in this segment where we talk about personal experiences, people that have failed us, or shopping experiences that have gone bad. And I just felt like this was just time to talk about someone who really is doing it well. So Sarah Johnson out of Salt Lake City, Jumbo John is her company, or Jambo John. And even that was a funny story. I asked her about her company name, and it went back to a story at Disney World's Animal Kingdom, and just made me laugh. And I just felt like that was the kind of person that I want to work with, someone who's got a sense of humor, a fun story, and isn't going to talk down to me or talk over my head, is really willing to partner with me. And so super, super excited to have that new website and a new friend and a new business partner. And then one more thing that I didn't get to share, I'm going to tack it on. I know we're trying to wrap up. She also was willing to break it down into phases. Because I said, I respect what you do. I'm not asking for a discount, but I'm being realistic. I only have this amount of money, X number of dollars to work with right now. I will have more in a couple months. And she's like, no problem. Here's what I propose for phase 1. And then for phase 2, we can do this. And then if you want to go on to phase 3, we can always upgrade to that later on. So again, just another lesson for us as event pros, things that you can do to make it approachable, whether it's providing options, providing payment plans.
Yeah. And if you think it's the right fit, there's no reason not to, in my opinion.
And the fact that I did have a finite budget, I had certain amount of money set aside for this project. I wasn't going to insult her and say, oh, well, could you do the whole thing for this? This is all I've got. It was like, okay, well, what can we do within this? I do value what you have to offer, and I want to do business with you, and I will come back and do more business with you down the road. And again, as business owners, sometimes it's really easy to not want to work with people that can't do our biggest package right off the bat. And sometimes being able to offer them a smaller option they can build on and making them feel valued
works better.
Is a good way to get long-term business. So
absolutely.
That's
Thanks
my
so
story
much
about Sarah.
Thanks so much for sharing your story, Vickie. That was great. This is episode 144, Creating Connections, kicking off the new year with a personal story. Thanks so much for sharing. I'm Mitch Taylor.
I'm Vickie Musni.
Creating Connections podcast, providing personal solutions through understanding people. We'll see you next time.
See you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Creating Connections podcast with Gitomer Certified Advisor Mitch Taylor and Certified Personality Trainer Vickie Musni. For more information on providing personal solutions through understanding people better, visit creatingconnections.biz.